Hello! Not long ago I reviewed the BetaFPV Meteor 75. I thought it was a pretty cool little beginner quad whoop. You use these nice 550 1S batteries. You can get a decent amount of flight time. Fly them indoors, outdoors. I had more fun outdoors to be honest, but I always do. And some of you guys said to me, what's the difference between this and the Air 75? So BetaFPV have sent me over an Air 75. And in theory, it looked, just reading the spec, it was all about like a little bit less weight. And we're talking grams, but grams on this sort of size equals sort of 10%. And in the box, you get the quad, you get this little bits of bobs. I'll go through this in close up, and you get this sort of canopy replacement. And when I first saw them, I thought, this is smaller. This looks diddly. But when you put them side by side, it is 75mm. But the motors are smaller. We've got 2-blade props as standard. The canopy is completely different. We've got a separate little ELRS receiver with the ceramic antenna. It does feel a lot lighter, and my point of view was I figured this is slightly less beginner friendly because it is sort of set up to be light and agile. Maybe not as easy, but I'll put it to the test and see how it goes. One thing about this is instead of these 550s, which I think are a little bit thick for this, it recommends these 450 Lava series, so I've got 4 of those, and I suppose we're looking at sort of higher spec, higher speed batteries than what was on the Meteor 75. Let's go into close up and I'll show you some of the features around here because things are a little bit different and quite interesting. So let's take a look. So here's the little Air 75 and I want to talk about some of the features. I've just put one of those batteries in. It is quite a tight fit. It will just about go. But there are some interesting things in this one which I wasn't normally sort of expecting from a little tiny whoop. I'm always expecting more than a 2-bladed prop, and it's quite unusual to have a separate receiver. This is one of the BetaFPV. It's like the little flat ceramic antenna. Now the first version of this one was particularly bad range. The next version was a lot better. It still doesn't do anything like, you know, a regular one, but this is a small little whoop, so I doubt you'll be going more than a few hundred meters away. One of the interesting things about it is how the camera angling works. You see you've got this sort of piece of plastic that goes round like that, and you've got several holes there, and each time you put it on the next hole up, it's going to pull this camera back. So this is the lowest angle at the moment, which is about what, 25-30 degrees maybe. It's hard to say, and as you pull back further it's going to go way up. You've got a spare one of those, and you can kind of see it here. So if we're on that hole, it's there, and then we can, as we go further on, it sort of pushes that back and back like that. 08025 motors, these running at 23,000 kV, so smaller motors than the Meteor, but faster, which is interesting. And underneath there's so little space, it seems that they've got a completely different connector. So instead of a USB connector, what you've got, if we look in this box, you've got this thing that attaches this little breakout board, which then goes to a USB-C to connect it up. And we've got some spare props there and some spare screws. Alright then, so I'm going to get this bound up to my transmitter and go on to Betaflight, see if there's anything I need or want to change. We'll try flying it in the house. I like a really flat camera angle for sort of exploring the house, but if it's wide enough it should be okay, maybe with a throttle curve on it or a throttle limiter, and then sort of take it outside into the woods, which is my normal place, see how it feels throwing it around. Normally these sort of high power little whoops are quite acrobatic. You can put them into places. They don't have a lot of inertia, so sometimes you'll go up and take the throttle off and then kind of stop. But yeah, we'll see how it goes and see how it flies.
Okay then, let's get on with the maiden flight. So I'm doing this indoors and I'm flying with a throttle limit of 60%, which I found is about right when dealing with 22 to 23,000 kV motors, so I got plenty of control of it. First thing I notice, aside from getting stuck here on the banister, is the camera angle is pretty wide, which is quite nice. The second thing I'm noticing, as you can see, is we've got some breakup already in the house. Now the house has a sort of 5.8 Wi-Fi going on We also have to go through a bunch of walls, so it's not entirely unexpected. This seems quite nice though, so let's get through into the garden where I like it most. At this point I notice I'm actually running at 25 milliwatts, which is probably not helping that situation. So first thing I want to do is bring it down and whack that power up a little more, see how it goes. So we've got the power up to 200 milliwatts now. I think this little VTX goes all the way up to 400, but 200 should normally be fine here. But I'm having a real problem, and I suddenly thought to myself, oh, have I got this on legacy mode instead of rapid fire mode on my rapid fire module? Because this is the kind of situation where the rapid fire module will really help when we've got signals bouncing off the walls and things like that. So I go into my goggles to change this, but the 5-way joystick, I can't seem to go upwards and it doesn't roll back down. So I'm kind of stuck in legacy until I can sort that out. Never mind, let's carry on and see how we go. I'm noticing a little bit of screen tear here, which I didn't really pick up on initially, but I'll come back to that. And this is just my torture test, although it's kind of, I'm cutting through slightly less walls here, so the picture's slightly better if you notice. But that seems okay. It's actually much worse out here. Flight wise, I'm liking how this is flying. It's very easy to maneuver. I was expecting this to be a bit more frisky, but it's actually pretty good, pretty easy to fly around, and you just point it where you want to go, and it seems excellent at that point of view. So mostly I want to get into the outside now to test it, because I am not enjoying the interference I'm getting between my solid walls and the interference from the 5.8 Wi-Fi everywhere. So let's bring it back down so I can go and experiment outside. Welcome once again to the woods. I'm in the normal place that I fly these little whoops with the trees and, well, with the trees. It's been a lot of sun and some rain, and that's made some things quite overgrown. We look at my normal takeoff point. We've got a bunch of reeds here, and where the sun's coming through there, it's really grown up along the path. So it might be dodgy doing the low runs through here, but where the sun hasn't penetrated so much, it's quite clear. Obviously got scraggle, and we've still got an amount of space to fly up there. So yeah, just get with it, I think. I mean, the whole point of this one is to see how good it feels on these better batteries, and is it a bit more acrobatic and a little bit, does the power to weight ratio better? Well, we'll find out in a sec. So I set these up with an inside and outside mode, where outside has no throttle limit, and that's obviously the one I'm going to use here. And we are up and away. As per usual, the first thing I do with these quads is kind of just fill them out a little bit, although it felt good enough to go through the tree. Not a big deal. And I wanted to see how this felt, particularly in trying some sort of acro manoeuvres, because it's a very lightweight, fast little whoop, and it seems to respond really very nicely. The camera angle's not as high as it could be, of course, so we can't go max speed, but nice little turd of speed, I thought, for something like this. I'm trying these split S's because it's one of the very typical things with whoops that they do get caught in their own prop wash. And because they don't have that inertia, as you turn over to come down or over for the split S, they kind of stop. So you're often hitting much more prop wash than you would in sort of a 5-inch. But this is feeling very good. It's feeling very nice to fly. I'm finding it very responsive, which is something I really like. And I'm not finding that when I go into these big turns it's sort of losing power. It's very easy to sort of manage itself through that, and it bounces off things pretty well. A test I tend to do on all my little whoops I fly here is to make sure I can go all the way along the trail and just out to the path without anything going particularly wrong. And on this one I notice we are getting quite a lot of break up on the VTX, perhaps more than normal. There is a little bit more overgrown, but I also can see that the Express RLS goes up to as high as -105 on the dBm RSSI, which is quite high. So two things that don't do well in flying that far away, really. Obviously it's got that little flat antenna, which is not the greatest, coupled with this VTX, which is apparently not doing very well if there's any objects in the way. I decided to try and split S a little tree bit I've seen here, but that doesn't quite go well when I don't give it enough welly. So let's give that another try. That time the split S looked good, but I missed the actual thing completely. So try number 3. We're round and through. Felt I went over there a bit high though, really. I randomly tried this same spot on the next battery, rolling the other way and then catching some reeds. Also in this second battery, I was trying to explore up a bit higher just to sort of check out what the tree canopy looked like, which was great fun and nice and easy to fly slowly. But I was getting hassles with the picture, which you don't really want at this height because that is a tricky quad to get down from these trees. So on my last battery here, I wanted to do a little bit of tree slaloming just to see how quickly I could wind in and out of these trees. And this is where I sort of made the decision or found that just quite how nicely this would fly. It's just the fact I'm not really having to do anything to try and adjust for this quad. It just flies how I'd like a quad to fly, so I'm not having to do much in terms of like changing the throttle as I go around. I'm pretty much just using the sticks as I would a bigger quad. It's not to say that it acts like a bigger quad, but it doesn't have that slight lack of power and heaviness that some little whoops will have. And I like the fact I've now bumped this into a lot of things, and it just seems to recover somehow. So yeah, I was pretty much flying around here. Look, another bounce, and amazing. Thinking, wow, this thing is so manoeuvrable. This is possibly the best handling whoop that I've flown. Just because it just seems to just work how I want it to work. I think it's a very sort of personal thing when it comes to how you like things to fly. I think it's mainly the fact that I don't have to think about upping the throttle around the corners or doing anything special. It just flies more like a sort of an open propped quad rather than something that's in the sort of general whoop thing with the prop guards and stuff. But yeah, it's flying really nice. I had another battery, and I have to say these little 450s are working really nicely. But what I decided to do is to go outside the woods just to fly along the path, see if I could find some trees to sort of dive and things like that. So we'll do that bit next. So we're just outside the woods onto the track, so I could fly up and down and see if I could basically do some tree dives or get amongst the bigger trees here. And it's good fun flying along, but this is where I found problems with the camera. What I found out, and you can see here, is if we get sort of more than half of the screen sort of very bright light, like the clouds and the sky, and the other half sort of trees, we get some screen tearing where it seems to join. It's like it can't quite handle the split between bright and darker, and I wanted to get close to these trees, and every time I was trying to get sort of in the tree to like fly through a little gap or dive through it, I was getting this terrible tearing, which is exactly how I saw it in the goggles, and is not easy at all to fly with, as you can probably imagine. And you can see the effect pretty well here. It's like more sky equals bad. If I face it downwards, it's fine. Face upwards, bad. Which is a real shame because this quad flies brilliantly, but between the VTX not being fantastic at going through things, and especially the camera having this issue with tearing, it's kind of ruined the experience for me a little bit. I wanted to make sure this wasn't just my goggles or the module. So on this little screen here, you can see the OSD and the house kind of warp. It's not as pronounced as the goggles, but there's something adrift here with this camera that's causing screen warping, which is not great, and big screen tearing as far as my goggles go.
So overall, a little disappointed, and that's mainly because this thing flies fantastically. If you're in an indoor situation and you don't have like the bright light, dark background separation, and you're not going too far away, you will be able to wish this around a race course and have the best time ever. It's only the fact I was outside and had that sun up there and the ground below, and that contrast just seemed to break the camera. Now, I did go back and just have a look at the video I did for this one. This is so heavy when I compare it to this one now. And typically, I was using this in 400 milliwatts VTX, so the VTX wasn't so bad. Maybe I should have just whacked the power up on that, but I thought 200 was plenty. But the VTX is not my main concern. You can work around that, you know what you're working with. It's definitely the camera. And so I'll be feeding that back to BetaFPV, because maybe I got a duff one. Maybe this is the same camera and this was absolutely fine and this one's not absolutely fine. Who can tell? It could be reviewer's curse, we get the dodgy one. But yes, it's frustrating. It's frustrating because it flies really, really nicely. This is literally the best flying whoop I've got. This feels like a really heavy thing. In terms of, like, for beginners, this is still, I think, good, because it's a bit more tanky, a bit slower, and a bit simpler and a bit stronger on the impacts. That said, I didn't manage to damage this at all, despite crashing into loads of things, and it just worked very nicely, apart from that camera. Obviously, I didn't particularly like the flat antenna on the receiver either, but again, I can deal with putting it into certain limits. It's the camera thing. The camera thing. Ah, what a shame. What a shame on the camera. Anyway, I will talk to BetaFPV and see if there's a solution to that, see if we just got a duff one or not. In the meantime though, this is the BetaFPV Air 75 and was very kindly supplied by BetaFPV for review. And of course there'll be links down below if you want to check it out in more detail. Hope the review's been helpful, and I will catch you in the next one. And if I've got any updates about the camera in this one, I will let you know. Bye for now.
Well, you've made it to the end of the video, so thanks once again for watching. If you like what you saw, then please consider subscribing, and if you really like what you saw, then be sure to check out the link to my blog for a variety of ways in which you can help support this channel.